Now to the budget battle brewing on Capitol Hill. Today, the president announced a budget proposal that is not sitting well with the grand old party, and with them leading both the House and the Senate, you can imagine the chances of this thing getting through. In fact, House Speaker John Boehner says the president is, and I'm quoting now, advocating more spending, more taxes, more debt. President Obama's 2016 budget arrived on Capitol Hill today, a massive $4 trillion spending plan. But before lawmakers get to that, President Obama wants them to focus on a more immediate budget issue. Funding for the Department of Homeland Security, it runs out at the end of this month.
We need to fund the department. Pure and simple.
Republicans are using the issue to wage a fight against the White House over the president's immigration actions.
You may have noticed they usually don't agree with me. But don't jeopardize our national security over this disagreement.
The president's 2016 budget, it calls for nearly $4 trillion in spending, a 6.4% increase from this year. The plan, it also includes a $478 billion public works program to upgrade the nation's highways and bridges, as well as transportation projects. Republicans, they're angry about the tax increases up to $2 trillion, including $320 billion in new taxes on corporations and the wealthiest Americans. The Obama administration, they want to put that money towards expanded tax cuts for the middle class. The president's budget will also end the sequester cuts that were put in place back in 2011 and were set to go back into effect in 2016.
I want to work with Congress to replace mindless austerity with smart investments that strengthen America.
Congress now poised to go through a lengthy negotiation process before sending something back to the president's desk here. And Andrew, there's a few different things to take. First off, the whole Robin Hood approach, that you're going to rob from the rich and give to the poor, and specifically more so the poor of the middle class. Made that the whole point of his State of the Union address here, that he was going to make the last couple of years of his term to try and leave the class that had been falling further and further behind. It's politically popular going after not only the top 1%, but the top 1/10 of the top 1%, and it manifests itself in the budget.
It polls particularly well, anything that's aimed towards helping the middle class, and especially making the top end foot the bill for it. It certainly got a lot in it that we heard from the State of the Union, that there's a lot to like, and it's I agree with the policy. We've talked about this before.
You have a better chance of being the next quarterback for the Seahawks if it passes.
Not going to happen, either one, I should point. I mean, there's no way that Republicans are going to go in on this. I mean, they're going to fight this tooth and nail. It strikes at the core constituency that they have.
To fight it tooth and nail.
Especially
going to get off the floor.
The question is, what are they willing to give up in exchange from sort of a bloody, very public fight on this, or are they willing to absolutely stake their bones to this and make this the be-all, end-all fight? Because if not, they'll have to come back and give something to the White House and form some sort of accommodation. They won't do that particularly willingly, but the broad strokes that the president's outlining.
And I get the president's argument when people say, "Why are you bothering doing this? He got no chance to do it." He's like, my job isn't to give them legislation that they're going to be willing to pass. It's my job to sell to the American public what I believe is right. He's certainly not unique in that. It's interesting. But there's a good philosophical debate about taxing offshore profits. American companies sticking their money in the Caymans or wherever else because they don't want to pay American taxes on it. I believe there's such a thing. Mitt Romney said that corporations are people. Well, corporations have patriotic responsibilities like the American public. I understand there is a healthy reason for negotiations on trying to bring that revenue back. But you ask their general person in the American public if they think that they should be able to hide their profits overseas when they got to pay their income taxes every year. I don't think corporations are going to find a sympathetic ear from Joe Q. Public.
No, absolutely. And that's interesting, the way you turned it on their head. If they're going to be people, they should be patriotic as well.
Right.
And keep their money here. It's absolutely true. But, I think it's the Times that's reporting tonight that there are areas that we do know where Republicans do have incentive to work with the president. One is about the Highway Trust Fund that we all know is going to, hit tough times very soon. And the other is because the Republicans really do want to lift the sequester as far as the military spending is concerned. So there is reason and room for them to maneuver together. But you're right, these are traditionally political statements by a president put out. I think it's interesting that he chose a picture of our very own Tappan Zee for the cover of the
Yep.
blue book, what's traditionally the blank blue page. There's a black and white picture of the Tappan Zee, which speaks to an issue everybody agrees about, which is infrastructure. So I do think there are some areas that they can maneuver on, but raising taxes on corporations or the rich, that's not going to go anywhere. I mean, we know there are areas where it's just not going to go anywhere.
You know what I think, Dom, is the president says best when he campaigns, right? Republicans, I don't know if the general public realizes, they're holding up Homeland Security funding because that's their, lever over the president. Why doesn't the president go to every key visual thing talking about Homeland Security and say, me, I'm for funding you. Ask your Congressman X why he doesn't believe in funding you right now. Why does he believe in putting America at risk? I think if we did that, the public would get a quick lesson in civics here where they'd say, wait a minute, why aren't they protecting X, Y, and Z? I think sometimes the president accepts a little bit too easily. Maybe not so much the last few months, but historically in the 6 years here, no too quickly.
That might connect, Richard, with the independent voters or voters that sway or decide an election. But if the president actually did that in the districts of these Republican members, the members would be hailed as heroes for standing up to Obama. And it goes back to the premise of all politics are local.
Yeah,
So-
but if you show I can get you X number of additional jobs, Coast Guard protection jobs or whatever, if we weren't working on an austerity plan here, instead we were funding it the right way, then they'll say, wait a minute, Bob and Jack and Jimmy would have their jobs right now if the Republicans approved the funding?
Well, that's what happened with health care in
Yeah.
certain states, and certain Republican governors still said, no thank you, Washington.
And keep in mind, the move on Homeland Security is connected to immigration. That's what they're using Homeland Security as the cudgel for, because the president took the executive orders on immigration.
But my only thing is, everybody likes a fair fight. And if you're going to fight on immigration, fight on immigration. But don't hold up Homeland Security
Well,
just because
But the president
you don't like his immigration
I think the
plan.
president thinks he's got a winning hand on that end of the argument anyway. I mean, the worst case scenario is they continue their objections over Homeland or over immigration, which wins for the Democrats. A lot of people, I think, have the idea that holding up Homeland Security in exchange for immigration doesn't play particularly well. I don't think the president wants to push necessarily on that one particular issue, just because it favors him. I think the matrix right now, there's certainly other parts of this fight where he'll go more
See, I
public.
have another theory, though. I do think that the president traditionally, as much as he does support his own executive order, I think there is some fear in the White House of going out there and talking about this executive order and what he's doing unilaterally. Because listen, this is a guy in 2007 and 2008 who criticized George Bush for doing the same exact thing. So I think as much as he believes he's in the right on this and they want to talk about immigration, they don't want to talk about that executive order that much. They don't want to talk about him acting unilaterally.
He's still a con law professor.
I
His heart,
still
doesn't
think
like
he
the,
does in
move,
his
yeah.
heart. And so I think we see his, failure to support what he's doing, because I agree with you. The latest Iowa poll had terrorism and security as the #1 issue on Republicans' minds. And if they're not going to fund Homeland Security, that's a big issue. And yet the president is reluctant to talk about it.
And I also think the public doesn't fully understand this isn't just some little Washington fight. It's Homeland Security. All right. When we come back, I'm going to talk about stories driving me crazy. Measles outbreak. It's not spread across 14 states. We're not talking about a case here or there. This stuff is real. And you know who's to blame here in many cases? Parents who decide they don't want to vaccinate their kids. And is it just us saying bad move here? Or how about some ramifications? Also, where does Governor Chris Christie stand on this? 2009, he said he had the backs here of the anti-vaxxers. Now, not so much. Magically, he could be running for office. We're going to talk about that and much more straight ahead.